Welcome back to Arena the Contest here with Flanks and Code, and we are continuing the Spotlight series. And in fact, we're pretty close to being done here. So this is the last main class. We've done Brute, Tactician, Tank, Healer, Shooter, Controllers, and now we're doing Bruisers today. And then there's kind of a unique class here that's just called the specials, and every character is unique, so they're not really a class archetype like the others. So we'll probably try to do that one next week, and then that should finish us out for the year. And that'll be it. So if you haven't checked out our Winter Bash video that we did yesterday, then go do that, because that was a really fun match with 8 people, and it's pretty crazy, but it was a fun, good match, real good match.
That was crazy.
All right, so we are going to start with the Bruisers here. So the Bruisers are kind of your melee class that isn't quite. They're not like a tank. They can't take a ton of damage, and they're not like a brute in the way that they deal crazy amount of damage. They're a little bit of a mix in between, and even really a utility support as well. We'll kind of get into them. In my opinion, they're probably the most unique class. They don't follow the standard fantasy motif quite as much as some of the other ones, like your brute, tank, healer, shooter situation. And all these characters play very differently in a way that makes them almost like a mix of other classes. So we'll kind of get to each one and talk about how each of those fit closer to some of the other classes while still being in their own distinct class, the Bruiser class. All right. Thousands may perish around me, but I shall stand and lead us to victory. All right. So we're starting here with Vanarus the Demon. I'd consider him even though they have him at a 4 on offense, I'd almost consider him maybe max offense. This character is extremely high, or can be extremely high damage, and he's got excellent positioning. He can weaken some allies, so we'll see here. But he's an amazing character. He's on our last stream, so you can see him if you haven't seen him before. All right, so he's Bruiser with the best ability to reposition enemies while also dealing massive damage and applying powerful debuffs. He's very important in strategies based on attacks in area and counter healing. So he's got 4 on offense, 4 on defense, which I guess there's some argument to be made for defense, but not. I'd probably place him a little bit lower. I think he's closer to like a 3 or a 2. Mobility definitely very high with his repositioning, and he's got he's got 2 effects, I guess, that get placed on enemies. So he's a little higher. Handling, relatively difficult just because of knowing when and where to reposition allies and when to use some of your abilities. So we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so the Bruiser class, they have 65 hit points, so they got the same as the Brutes. 8 basic attack, same as Brutes. 7 defense, which is 1 defense higher than them, and they only have 5 movement. So basically, they've traded that extra movement for a little bit more defense. All right, so the passive for all Bruisers is Circle of Retribution. The trigger is enemy starts its turn adjacent to you and includes you as a target of its attack. The effect is enemy takes 4 damage, and this can't lower its HP below 1. So, one thing to note here is it says that it includes you as a target of its attack. So that's important because you don't have to be the main target of an attack. You could be uh, you could be a secondary target, like part of an AOE attack, and still gain this benefit. But the enemy has to start its turn adjacent to you. So one caveat between circle protection and circle retribution is circle protection is you have to be adjacent to the enemy, but for tanks, you have to be the first target of the attack isn't you. So it has to be the very first target. So in terms of like an AoE ability, if the enemy decides to attack you first and then attack your probably adjacent or close by ally, then Circle of Protection won't apply for a tank. This isn't the case for Bruisers. They just have to be included at some point, but they have to be the focus of it. So you'll kind of notice that there's a little bit of like almost a stacking ability if you use them with a tank, right? So if you did put them with a tank and they decide to attack you, the Bruiser, then they would take 4 damage from Circle of Retribution and then another 4 damage from Circle Protection and get that penalty. So it's one of those things though that it's really easy for especially a player character to do one time and realize, oops, I'm never doing that one again. I think I did when me and my wife were first starting this game. That's exactly what I did on her, and she quickly learned and never did it again. So then she ended up attacking the tank at the beginning every time. So anyway, so that's Circle of Retribution. Pretty good passive. It's nice to get that extra little damage, but you got to be positioned well. So this character can be really good at screwing up the positioning of enemies or putting it in a place that he'll be able to benefit with his circle. All right, starting with the primary abilities, we got Blades of Agony. It's a range 2 ability, 11 damage, which is decent. The effect is another enemy within 5 squares of you takes 4 damage. So now you've turned your Blades of Agony there into 15 damage, and you may swap places with that target. And the positioning of that can be really good. You could be, in this case, right, you could be 2 positions away from that person, swap around with them, and maybe it's like a healer in the back, and kind of pulling them up into the battle. So that way they can't be just sitting in the backline area. And there's a lot of other ways that you could, kind of mess around with this. Like, let's say you get thrown into the lava, and your enemy that had just knocked you in. Like, I know we've had a couple times with, like Rurik, right? He's got Crushing Blow, where he's able to move a target up to 2 squares and then move himself 2 squares towards it. Well, you could just swap places with Rurik and throw him right back into the lava after he does Crushing Blow on you. So it's a nice little counter type ability and really good strategic wise where you use it. All right, so Blaze of Agony, really good ability. Dance of the Damned. It is a one enemy, one range, 10 damage. The target is weakened once per turn. Let's pull out the reference guide here, and weakened is -3 damage when your attack hits an enemy. Do not apply when attacking allies. So you can't get the benefit of that. But it's a good way to lessen some of the damage, kind of help make yourself, I guess, a little bit more tanky. I wouldn't really rely on this as being a super tank type ability, but a little bit does help. And then you may move any number of enemies within 5 squares of you, 1 square each. And this is really the true power of this ability here, because it doesn't give you like 1 enemy or 2 enemies or something like that, or somebody that's just adjacent. It's any number of enemies within 5 squares of you. So you can clear an area, or at least mess up the movement of a lot of enemies pretty quickly with this ability. It's really good one for tanks, for example, use against tanks. Throw them back, they can't get circle protection. Um, let's see. Well, I guess if the tank is already adjacent to you and you're starting your turn, then I guess it would still count. But you'd have to then follow through on the rest of it, right? Um, But more interesting was this last PvP event. We had Talessa here, the new special character. She has an ability called Aura of the Queen, where she starts your turn and chooses a harmful condition, and the enemies that are adjacent have this condition. Well, basically, you can just push her back, and then if she's positioned herself in a way that she would gain benefit for you and maybe against one of your other team members, then you basically screwed up that whole strategy for her. And this was exactly why Alex was pretty worried about Vanarus when we were playing yesterday during the Winter Bash ability when he was playing the Dragon Queen. So can be a really good move. You can obviously throw people into lava with this one, or maybe do some set up people for mobbing, um, or just put them out of position. So Dance of the Damned is a pretty good one too. All right, moving on to the special abilities. We have one target, one square, Soul Corruption, 25 damage. This is very strong hit here, and the effect is a permanent. And the permanent is you choose an enemy within 5 squares of you. It can't regain HP. I think the best, so obviously, preventing an enemy from not regaining health is really good. But what's even better about this is just the fact that you don't even have to do soul corruption on the person you're attacking. You can put it on anybody else that's within 5 squares of you. So that can be a really, clutch way to say you're attacking like a DPS character trying to, like a shooter, for example, trying to get him down. Well, you have a tank that's nearby, and maybe he's more likely to, get some additional healing, or another DPS character that you're trying to take down as well. Well, you throw on Soul Corruption on him, and they ain't going to be getting any healing. And in fact, I think it was 2 streams ago, I personally used this one, I think, relatively pretty effectively against Priest and Code. I think I put it on, was it Rurk? Had Soul Corruption
Yes.
on him?
Yes.
Yeah. And so basically it made it so that way their healer could only heal one person, even though their tank was kind of getting beaten down, and he was kind of getting focused on for a while. So, and 25 damage is, basically the top end for the base value of a special attack. So it's pretty good. Um, it's not like a crazy damage type ability, but it's more that condition type effect. Now here is the true moneymaker of Vanarus.
Let's put it lightly.
Yeah, right. This is and you guys might remember this from my last spotlight video when I was talking about characters having signature abilities. This is without a doubt Vanarus's signature ability, Death Sentence. It's a range 1, and it has to be a single enemy with 20 hit points or less, and it doesn't actually do any damage. It only does an effect, which is actually kind of an interesting way they did it. Because if you make yourself immune to effects, like, let's see, I think it's Renkyr has this. Yep. Renkyr the Dragon Avenger has this, and we'll get down to him eventually, but he has an ability that makes him immune to new effects. Essentially, he could make himself immune to death sentence because the base hit doesn't actually do any damage. It's all through the effect. So the effect is the target dies, and that's the main target that you're focusing on. And then another enemy within 5 squares of you takes 20 damage. So basically, this ability can do up to a maximum of 40 damage. It's pretty wild. I mean, 40 damage without any additional buffs. I mean, we're not talking about with empowered or even like with his passives. It's just pure effects, 40 damage. Obviously, you gotta plan out the positioning well, and there has to be a situation of where somebody's low health. But go back if you haven't seen it. I think it's a couple weeks ago we did a PvP match, and I was able to do a double kill on this one, killing both Code character and Priest in a single blow with Death Sentence, and it was pretty amazing play, I gotta say. So anyway, that ability, without a doubt, is the shining achievement of Vanarus, and you'll notice throughout all of his abilities, they don't just affect the person that he's attacking. It's everybody within 5 squares of you, which is actually a pretty decent range. I mean, it's not quite as good as 8, but 5 is really good. That's the same range that controllers have for their passive Despair. So you can be, even Blades of Agony is basically almost like it's pretty much like using Despair. So the part that I wanted to talk about earlier is Vanarus. I'd consider is a mix between a brute and maybe a controller or tactician type character. The reason I say that is because he can do a lot of damage with his abilities, but then he also has powerful effects um, that make him kind of similar to a controller or a tactician. And so he's just kind of unique in the way that he's not, just straight doing crazy amounts of damage right up. It's through his effects that actually make him a very strong combatant. So anyway, what do you think of Vanarus the Code?
That sentence is broken. Um, between the two streams, even yesterday, I used that sentence on Talessa, killing her, and then inflicted 20 to one of the other characters, which was pretty lethal. And then
It didn't kill him, I think, but I mean, 20 damage is a lot. When all the
well,
characters,
yeah, it's also the
don't
fact
have that
that
much.
20 damage to one character as well as killing another character.
Yeah,
So that's pretty lethal, and especially when you do a couple streams prior, you do a double kill with it. It's pretty nutsy, but
yeah,
um, he's really good. His range is decent, and um, there's not much you could say other than he's pretty good. I mean, Soul Corruption doing 25 damage and leaving the permanent can't regain HP is really good too. So I mean,
yeah.
I
But the thing is, all of his abilities are very, you have to be very aware of positioning, um, and sometimes circumstantial, right? With like death
right,
sentence, you have to make sure your enemy is at 20 hit points or less. But very much position oriented because of like swapping and moving enemies around a little bit and doing extra damage to people or knowing exactly who you're gonna put soul corruption on. Um, so that is a very good argument as to why handling is pretty challenging for him. And remember,
right,
handling a low handling score means they're much more difficult to play.
right. I think someone who's just starting the game, he'd be a little bit tricky to figure out who you should be doing what ability to and how to position him. But for more experienced players, he could be very deadly. So,
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
that's kind of true for most of the bruisers. I think the more experienced you are with the game,
Yeah,
the
and,
more
and we'll go
effective.
we'll go along and yeah, I think most of them are pretty similar. I mean, I think some of them are a little bit higher, but yeah, the bruisers in general is a little bit more of a challenging class because they, and I haven't gotten to all the other ones, but they are like essentially mixes of the other classes,
Right.
and knowing when and where to use those abilities is pretty fundamental idea and theme that exists in the bruiser class. So yeah, anyway, Vanarus is a fantastic character in terms of like people starting out. I don't think there'd be a problem with anybody, using him. I don't think his effects are so crazy difficult to understand that nobody could, play him getting started. You definitely could get it going at the beginning. It's just using it effectively is really the crux of this character. All right, so now we're going to move on to Ascaran the Archangel. Bruiser with good defense and the power to heal. In addition, he can transfer his health to allies, ideal for boosting and protecting an important hero. He's also a reliable healing source for team with no healers. All right, you'll notice his damage is a lot lower than Vanarus was, and in fact, like I said before, I thought Vanarus had, you know, was low on their scale, but much higher defense and mobility on this character. His effects is kind of in the middle, and handling is a little bit easier. That one maybe could go down a little bit. Can be a little more difficult if you don't know exactly how you're doing it, but he's not too bad. So going here to Ascaran for his primaries, he's got Exalted Strike, range to one enemy, 11 damage. The effect is you are toughened. And toughen, for people that don't know, is -3 damage when hit by an enemy attack. And you may transfer up to 10 hit points of your own health to an ally within 5 squares of you. So you'll probably hear me say this a couple times. We've called Ascaran the hit point tank. And when I say tank, I don't mean tank as in like the tank class. I mean like a holding gasoline type of tank, except he's holding hit points. Because he's able to transfer his own hit points to other allies. It's basically like if you give him more health, he can be siphoning that off to his allies. So transferring 10 hit points is the strongest heal in the game. When you well, okay, for a primary attack, it's the strongest heal in the game, right? The only person that gets closest, I believe, is Tarim, and I don't know, maybe you can correct me if I'm missing another one, but I'm pretty sure he's the only one that can do 10 health on a primary attack.
Right.
So that's extremely strong. I mean, you're talking about what? I mean, that's almost 20% maybe of a lot of the characters' health.
Yeah.
Maybe a little less than 20%, but so that's quite a bit right there to pass out. And of course, it doesn't have to be someone that's like adjacent to you. It can be somebody that's within 5 squares. So that's not too unusual either for a lot of like the other supportive characters, like Sir Eric, right? He's one of our tank healers, so he's supportive in that way. But he also does some healing, so he's probably like one of the closest ones that's kind of like Askren. And then, and then we got like Zafara, right? So she's got
Hmm.
a heal 4. You are an ally within range, so she gets up to 8 on hers, but she's a controller character, so it's a little bit different. But 4 health, still really good. I think the Faceless Emperor, doesn't he get a heal? Yeah, you are an ally or an ally within 5 squares, regains 4. And then now Talessa, she has a regain 3 and a +1 for each harmful condition. So anyway, that 10, extremely strong, especially if you know when to use this one. Um, So keep that one in mind, and of course make yourself a little more difficult to take down. All right, going on to Wings of Justice, we got a range one, target one. The benefit is you may move up to 3 squares before declaring the target. So just as a reminder, that means even if you need to move through somebody that's like or that's like in your way and you would have to take a reaction for, you can essentially just negate that part, move right up into position next to them, and then use Wings of Justice to fly around them and attack the target that you're actually going for. So then you'll do 10 damage, and the effect is you are protected, which is very strong buff. That's the +3 defense from enemy attacks. So now you got 10 defense, which is pretty good, right? Your 50% chance of being hit. Or at least, I guess you could say it the other way too, right? 50% chance of not being hit. Then you or an ally within 5 squares of you regains 3 hit points. So basically, that's the same as like Sir Eric's. It's really close. Oops. So, to Holy Sword, except you actually do more damage than Holy Sword. But and you get a fly.
Extra movement.
And in that one, you're toughened too. You get protected. So honestly, like Wings of Justice is, in my opinion, hands down better than Holy Sword. And Shield of Faith obviously has got that benefit and protected. So that one's pretty good. I'd say that one's a little more tough to compare to, but definitely beats Holy Sword, sure. Anyway, so it's a pretty good one and a way to get some reliable healing. And so even if you're not healing your allies, this is a good way to at least apply it to yourself, right? So you don't even have to be in position. You could just make an attack on somebody and then heal yourself with it, and then your next turn use Exalted Strike to just blow that tank and start passing out those big heals. All right, so let's jump into the special attacks. So Ascaran is one of the 4 bruisers that has an interrupt attack. So ranged 8, like all the other interrupts. One enemy making an attack, and the drawback is you take 10 damage before striking. 0 damage on the effect or on the hit. And so this one's kind of interesting. So a lot of the other interrupts work in this way. An enemy declares that they're going to attack you with, such and such ability, and then you say, "Hold on, I am interrupting and I'm using Holy Light." Well, how this one works is normally like, let's see, I think we talked about Zund like in the last one with like Mirage, right? He did a little damage, but he got to negate the entire attack. So basically, the enemy doesn't normally even roll their dice. It's actually different with Ascaran. The enemy is still going to roll their dice and do their attack, but now they get this applied to them of a -16 damage on a hit and no residual damage on a miss. So if they use the special attack, you're talking about either negating most of the attack or all of the attack damage. Obviously not the effect, but you'll at least negate the damage. But then even better is if they miss, especially for like a special attack, that's 15 damage most of the time with most other heroes. So completely negating that 15 damage is a really good way. So it's almost like negating an attack, but slightly different than some of the other ones. So and then on top of that, you get the second part of it: an ally within range, which is range 8, regains 16 hit points. So basically, you're getting a net 6 health on this one, and negating most of an attack. So it's not too bad. Definitely not my favorite interrupt, but it's decent, I guess. I mean, most of the time I prefer one of the interrupts that actually negates an entire attack, just because you don't even have to worry about it at that point. Um, but like Holy Light, for example, um, so this first part of the effect of where you like reduce the amount of damage. Trying to remember, would this apply to? I don't think this would apply for Overlord, right? Because you can't reduce the boss's damage, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So in terms of that one, that's kind of not great for. I mean, you still get the heal, so that's not too bad. But then you just don't get that number one effect part at all, which is a little disappointing. But that's a lot of the interrupts, especially with bosses. They're not really often that great. All right, and then this is definitely his signature move here. Celestial Armor, range 1 enemy, 20 damage, so that's a pretty decent damage, especially for the effect that you're going to see. Is a permanent. You get to choose an ally within 5 squares of you, and while you are alive, this enemy is toughened, or this ally is toughened and blessed. Right, so toughens -3 damage and blessed that they get to roll twice and use the best result. So that's a very powerful effect. And the main reason we say that is because basically it's pure numbers. I mean, most of the other effects that are permanent, you get one thing, right? You're getting
Hmm.
like a permanent of hastened, or you're getting like a permanent of one kind of a effect, or permanent protected, or some kind of healing, right? But this one you get toughened and blessed. So in a way, you give it to an ally. So you basically make that ally a little tougher. You could put it, on melee character, and you could put it on a ranged character as well. I guess that wouldn't be too bad either, because everyone loves blessed, and toughened isn't one of those ones that's pretty good because no matter who it is, will probably take some damage. So you're just kind of reducing it for people. Anyway, and another thing to note too is celestial armor, and I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but anytime that you get an ability to regain a special attack, for example, Jade has Requiem of Spirit. An ally within range regains one spent special attack. If you use celestial armor on one of your allies, you have Jade in your team, you use Requiem of Spirit, you could regain celestial armor and then apply that to a separate ally. It can't be the same one, it has to be a separate ally, but then they both get toughened and blessed. Now, you could say the same kind of effect for a lot of things, but like I said, is you're getting two separate positive conditions that are, pretty good. Especially blessed, in my opinion, is a really good one. And you get to apply that to two separate characters. Like, whew, making a tanky team there. So anyway, Ascaran the Archangel, definitely the HP tank. Very much, he is a mix of a healer and a tank. Um, in fact, I mean, he has a lot of similarities to Sir Eric. He doesn't have quite the I mean, I don't know. I guess there's some trade-offs, right? Sir Eric can get like Divine Sacrifice, for example, where he's, given some 20 HP and everything, but you have like that drop of 10 hit points you can give to another ally. That's really good, and then you got, your standard heal and your interrupt. So he's pretty close to Sir Eric in terms of healing potential, and kind of being a tank. So in some ways they kind of overlap, but that celestial armor is a very strong effect, and then you can just dump tons of hit points on people. So very unique. character. He's got an awesome model too. I guess I didn't cover the model for Vanarus, but I think Ascaran was one of the first updated pictures that we saw with him and his epic sword and angel wings and everything. And Vanarus, he's got his like skull sword and everything, but his is it's all right. I don't think it's super. Vanarus isn't super great, but Ascaran's is fantastic. I very much like the new model and really am excited to see that and excited to see people paint that one for sure. It's going to be an awesome model. So what do you
Yeah,
think about Ascaran?
just to comment on the character model, definitely like the new detail on his. Even though it's pretty much the same model, the extra detail's nice. But getting into the character itself, the abilities are really interesting. His interrupt is a little lackluster in my opinion, as we mentioned.
Yeah,
Especially if they hit, you're pretty much taking 16 and regaining 16, so that zeroes that out.
yeah,
Um, Celestial Armor though is very strong, and Wings of Justice is also very interesting ability, especially since it heals a little bit and gives protected.
yeah,
Um, Exalted Strike is not bad either, but being able to dump 10 HP on someone else is, that's a lot. I
yeah.
mean,
And in my opinion, but I mean, besides Celestial Armor, which is a very strong effect, I think that's his, one of his most powerful moves. I mean, Wings of Justice ain't too bad either, but definitely being able to dump 10 hit points on some ally is great.
right. It's definitely in a lot of situations that's a lot of HP to give someone. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the thing is, right? You got to remember, the more you take out of that tank, there's less for Askren, right? So you got to make sure he
careful.
himself is being very careful because sure he's got like protected and toughened and stuff that he could use, but that doesn't really make him immune from damage, and he only has 7 defense. He's got 65 hit points. So if you're playing the PvE campaign, I definitely suggest if you take Askren, make sure to get the extra hit points for the level
Yes.
up items there because you're going to want to be milking that tank the entire time you're playing, especially if you're not using a healer. But you're going to want to make sure he's protected. And if there's the cases of being able to go get those chests, make sure that Askren can go get those because then he can help redistribute that out to the team. So anyway, that's Askren, very tanky but healy hero. All right, now we got Ohris the Monk. Bruiser with good mobility, he can ignore debuffs and neutralize the effects of enemy attacks, ideal for avoiding permanent effects. With the ability to hit 2 enemies at once, he takes advantage of positioning strategies. Sometimes I think it's funny when they say like, takes advantage of positioning strategies, because in my opinion, like positioning is so key in this game that like every almost every class or hero could be part of a positioning strategy, right? Obviously there's some that maybe utilize a little bit more, right? For example, like Neri, right? She's got a lineup, like her special attack, to be able to do a bunch of damage to people, um, or like the Minotaur, right? Being able to
Hmm.
line up people, but even still, I think it's kind of funny because honestly, I classify a lot of the characters as positioning strategy characters.
Right. Most of a lot of effects for these characters, you need to be in the right position.
Yeah.
So
All right. So Ohris, they give him 3 offense. Honestly, I think he could probably be moved up a little bit, especially with his first primary that we're going to see here in a second. I think that's kind of being a little too conservative. He can do some decent damage, but he's also got some really great defensive abilities. And then of course, some good movement, some decent effects, and then handling is kind of middle ground. And I mean, yeah, maybe his handling could be a little bit lower, a little more challenging, but we'll kind of get into it first. So for his primary, we got Dashing Strike. This is kind of his AOE sort of type of ability. So he gets to attack up to 2 targets, and he gets to move 4 squares before declaring the first target. So that's a pretty decent amount of range to be able to move. Uh, so you get right your 5 movement, and then you turn that extra 4 there into a 9. So you can do 9 movement essentially by using this attack. And then we have so then it'll do 9 damage per hit. So you could do up to 18 damage with this attack if you hit both. And the effect is that the first target hit can't make reaction attacks. So remember though that the positioning still is key. So if you move into a position that is only adjacent to one enemy, then you won't be able to make that second strike because it has to be a second target, and you don't get to move again. So you would have to make sure that wherever you're moving, you're going to be adjacent to 2 enemies. You won't take any reaction attacks getting into position, but you'll need to be in a good spot for it, and then then you could do up to the 18 damage, and then you could potentially maybe help one of your allies be able to move around, so that way they don't have to worry about inciting a reaction attack on the first target that he hits. So make sure that you pick the correct person to allow that, right? If your shooter is going to need to run around somebody or whatever, then definitely don't want to put it on the guy that's further away from them. So Dashing Strike, pretty good ability. I mean, 18 damage on the strike. You got to roll twice, so there's that a little bit trade-off, but still, that's a pretty strong hit in my book. We're not talking about brute level here, but still, 18 damage, not anything to look down on. All right, then we got Kai Barrier. Kai Barrier is kind of like the tank ability, or a little bit more of a tank ability for Ohris here. So it's a range 2, 1 target, 10 damage. And the effect is you are toughened once per turn. Toughened again is -3 damage when hit by an enemy attack. So just make him a little more tougher to hit. And, toughened, right, you see this a lot. Toughened is used, on Exalted Strike. And then we got like Weakened for Dance to the Damned. And then Renkyr is a little bit different story, but he's got his own type of tanky moves. But you'll notice a theme of Bruisers have abilities that lessen the damage, either basically applied to them, so that way they can't be taken down quite as easily as, say, like Brutes, where they're just pretty much focused purely on damage and helping to do damage for their allies. But they're not too worried about making sure that they're not taking a lot of hits, with the exception, obviously, of like Count Blake with Nightcloak. But other than that, they're all pretty focused around that idea. All right, so you're toughened and immune to special attacks from enemies. So obviously, this is one of these abilities that for PvE is not really that good, because right now, right, most enemies do not have special attacks. That doesn't really do anything for you. But PvE, this can be a very strong ability. It's in some ways it's like the other side of the coin of Shield of Flowers, where Shield of Flowers makes you immune to damage from the next primary attack that hits it. This one, you're immune to special attacks. And special attacks obviously are much more devastating. In our last stream, in fact, I think Shield of Flowers got put on Katarina, and the enemy thought that giving her Shield of Flowers is going to make her safe. Well, then I think it was, what was it? Rokaru basically went up and did Dragon Spirit on her, And so
Mhm.
he's able to do that because he can do special attacks and doesn't have to worry about using his primary on that one. So anyway, so that can be a strong effect in PvP, not so good in PvE. And this is kind of another fundamental part of this character, and I'll get into the specials and explain why this character's not really that great for PvE. All right, so we got for his specials, he has an interrupt. He's the other bruiser with the interrupt. Wrath of the Tiger, range 8, one enemy making an attack, drawback, 10 damage before striking. Can't lower your hit points below 1. This one does 5 damage, so you get at least a little bit, and you get to negate the target's attack. And so this is, I guess, kind of the interesting thing. This is type of an ability that you could kind of throw willy-nilly. Like you could use it like in PvE, I guess, right? Because you could negate some enemy's attack, and then if it's a primary attack, which basically they're all going to be doing, then you get to do 10 plus damage. So you get to do 15 total damage with an interrupt. So that's not too bad, right? Um, but it's not the most amazing thing either because you're not always using a special um, just for stopping primary attacks. Like if you miss, for example, you do 15 damage anyway. So like it's one of those ones that like okay, yeah, you could do that, but then you're even if you miss, they're still going to take 15 damage. So Wrath of Tiger, it's okay. Not the greatest interrupt, but you're gonna at least do some damage with it, especially as an interrupt. But you got to use it at the right points, or you just got to whiff it. All right, and then you got Path of Purification. One enemy, one range, 24 damage, so it's a pretty strong hit. The effect is a little bit the lackluster part. So you may remove up to 3 permanent effects from combatants within 5 squares of you in any combination. Oh god. This is one of these abilities that I wanted them to change because I feel like this is an extremely rare circumstance. Um, there's, with the exception of maybe the game yesterday, I
It's
don't
true.
think I've ever been in a situation before where an enemy or any of the enemies that were within 5 squares of me, or even really any of the enemies at some point, all of them had a total of 3 permanent effects that needed to be removed, right?
Mhm.
So it's so lackluster. Like maybe you use it to remove one permanent effect, but it's not even like a trade. You don't even get to like give it to yourself. You just remove it from them. And what's worse about it too is so okay, so you could use it against a couple different enemies and at least get 2 of them, right? But there's no additional benefit to it other than just depriving them of that special effect. In my opinion, I think what would be a little bit more exciting is you get to remove up to 3 permanent effects from combatants within 5 squares of you, but you also got to do additional damage if you did remove it, or if there wasn't permanent effects to be removed, you got additional damage buff. I think that second one might be better, and in fact, I think that's the suggestion I gave Dragori too. And they could maybe drop down Path of Purification a little bit on damage, but maybe make it like like a 16 or 17 or something, and then for like um, every condition or permanent effect that's removed, or if there isn't one removed, maybe you do like 4 plus damage on that enemy, right? Or you get to do 4 damage on that enemy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a little lackluster that all it is just removing an effect. You don't get that benefit. You just deprive them of it, and it's just so circumstantial. You never have three permanent effects. Yesterday was the first time I think I've ever seen three effects on one character. And for people that watched that was Rokaru. He had Dragon Spirit on himself. That's his own ability. He had stolen Cedric's Bloodthirst ability and added it to himself. And he had Jade's Inspire Greatness on himself. So he had three different effects, and that is the only time that I've ever seen that many effects on somebody. So, and you guys, the enemy team didn't even have Aura, so it didn't even obviously matter in this case. But anyway, there's a lot that could be added and modified by this character, and hopefully he's going to get better with the addition of new special attacks and maybe more effects are passed out. And I think that's part of the Dragori's idea for Tenaris Adventures. So that way there's a little bit more going on with this character. In theory, he's kind of a kind of like your I don't know. I'd almost say like a tactician and maybe a little bit of a tanky type character, I'd say, right? Because he's kind of he's providing some benefits and taking away effects from enemies, but he's also kind of moving around a little bit. So he's really a lot of mix of a lot of things, I think you could say. But anyway, so that's probably enough about Ohris. He's got definitely a much better enhanced model. He's holding an awesome weapon in his hand in comparison just with his fists that he had before. So somewhere along the way he found a weapon. So we're glad about that. And then like an epic hairdo too,
Yeah, he
because I
didn't
think
have that.
Ohris. In fact, it's almost kind of funny when you think about it, right? Because the picture shows him bald, but then his miniature he has hair. So which is it? Like, is this the miniature happened after they took this picture? Yeah.
Who knows? That's the one thing that sticks out to me is he's like he has a ponytail now.
Yeah. But it doesn't even match up with his picture.
No, I mean he doesn't have a weapon in his picture.
Yeah.
So
All right, so now we're gonna move to Renkyr, the Dragon Avenger, and he is my personal favorite character. He is the Bruiser with good defensive ability. He can focus on an enemy to deal more damage for the entire match. He's one of the few heroes that can revive a dead ally. Ideal in several strategies due to his versatility. I think versatility is the key word with this character. So while the other characters a little bit of a mix between bruisers and tanks and healers and tacticians and whatnot, Renkyr's kind of got it all going on for him. He's got some damage abilities. He's got some tanky abilities. He's got resurrection skill that's giving out life. So he's kind of a healer, and then he's also thrown out some conditions, so a little bit like controller type or tactician, I guess you could say either. So he's got pretty much a mix of almost all the classes kind of in this one character, which I think is one of the most exciting things about him. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't let you talk about Ohris. Was there anything else you want to say about Ohris?
and no, you touched on all the points. I mean, the one point I was gonna make that you pretty much finished with was I think Path of Purification will probably get better as the game goes on with new characters and stuff. So,
Yeah,
um,
hope so.
but we hope so. Yeah, especially if they don't want to, if they don't plan on changing it. Hopefully, he becomes more useful in that sense. But that's about it.
Yeah. Alright, back to Renkyr. So, for primary buildings, he has Dragon Blood, range 2, one enemy. The benefit is you are blessed and ignore curse. That right there is probably half of the best part of this ability. 11 damage, which is a pretty strong primary. And then the effect is you are immune to new effects from enemies except passive powers. So, this ability is just so good, right? I mean, for one thing, you're ignoring cursed, right? So you don't have to worry about cursed, and you're blessed. You don't even need to go stand on an altar. You don't need some kind of special effect or somebody else to do something for you. You're just doing it all on your own. You go around and you bless yourself. So you're rolling twice, making your hits, and you're doing 11 damage, and then your effect is really, really, really strong. In fact, this is his, in my opinion, it's his tank ability here, because being immune to new effects can be extremely devastating. I mean, we were talking earlier just about death sentence, right? Basically, he's immune to death sentence if he's got dragon blood on, and he won't take any damage. Um, and then same thing from I mean, pretty much anything else. Even NPC characters like dragons or whatever. They'll do their damage, but then they won't be able to apply their effect, and sometimes their effect is even more devastating than that damage. So, I mean, it's just makes him really, really tanky and tough, and at the same time, he's giving him a very good chance to actually be able to give himself that protection. Um, and so there's one part I wanted to talk about. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I could just talk about it now. I kind of consider Renkyr your like out of all the heroes, he is the hero that gives you the best chances, like best opportunities, even if you miss, more than any other hero, and we'll see that here in a second. So, Syrian Vengeance, one range, one enemy, 11 damage again, so decent damage there, and then the effect is the target is cursed. And we talked earlier, right? Curse, very strong effect, reducing the chance that your enemy is going to be able to hit you. The target takes +5 damage if it's a dragon, or if Mark of Death is applied on it. So, Mark of Death, which you probably haven't seen yet because we haven't gotten it to yet, is a special attack of this character. So, the I'd say the second part of the effect can be a little bit more challenging to put because you're not always going to want to waste Mark of Death on a lot of enemies. But still, it can help you do a lot of damage, and he's extremely good in dragon battles, obviously, because they count as dragons. So you get +5 damage each turn, and here's the best part of it all: the miss. The target takes 5 or 10 residual damage instead of 5. Oh, like that is so amazing. So like if you're fighting a dragon, if you hit him, you do 16 damage. If you miss him, you do 10 damage, which is almost like like you freaking didn't do anything at all. So like, um, if you're playing against a regular player, um, and you miss your attack, you're still you're doing one less damage than you would if you hit the character. Obviously, you're not going to get the cursed, but still, I mean that's so good. Basically, you're making it so that way you are guaranteed at least 10 damage every time you use this ability, and you get one more if he's if you actually hit, and then of course 5 more if you have the special circumstances of Dragon and Mark of Death. But it's, oh god, I love Syrian Vengeance. It's so good. Just, yeah, love it. All right, and then let's jump into his special attacks. Life Explosion, range 8, one dead ally. So this is his resurrection ability. That's kind of like a healer here. So you get to revive the target, place it within 5 squares of you with 25 hit points. So it's a little bit lower than some of the heroes, but it's not definitely not the lowest. And no special attacks. So, that's not too unusual for a lot of the hero resurrection abilities, except for, I think, like Zafara. She's got the one that you get to bring back one special
Hmm.
attack. And then, on top of that, you or another ally within range regains 15 hit points. So really, you're getting 40 hit points on this resurrection skill. That's extremely, extremely powerful. And to top it off, this is like Searing Vengeance in the way that even if you miss this ability, which is very possible, you regain 20 hit points. That's higher. That's 5 points higher than basically everyone else gets. Because if you do like Requiem of Spirit from Jades, right, you're only getting 15 hit points back. If you Same thing with basically Ustar or Talia or yeah, I mean pretty much all of them. Anybody that has one of those strong heals, they're only going to get back 15. You're getting back 20 even if you miss. So this is an extremely powerful ability. 40 hit points in total is a ton of health. I mean, we talked about 40 already, and even if you miss, you're still getting a better outcome than any of the other healers. So Life Explosion, incredibly powerful resurrection ability. Only thing better, in my opinion, is Zafara's, but not by much. Not by much. All right, now we got Mark of Death, range 8, one enemy, 25 damage. So that's the max damage there that a lot of the, Vanarus got, right? And
Hmm.
then you get the effect of a permanent. You get to choose. So you're putting Mark of Death. You're choosing an enemy within range. It doesn't need to start its turn adjacent to you to trigger your Circle of Retribution. So Mark of Death is really good in that ability, right? Because Circle of Retribution is one of those passives that can still be relatively easy to circumvent if they don't start adjacent to you. Then basically they're they won't be affected by it. But this one makes it so that anytime you get attacked by that person that has Mark of Death on them, they are triggering Circle of Retribution and taking that additional 4 damage there. So that's a great one to get early for somebody that has high hit points, and especially is going to be likely to hit you. All right, and then here is the, in my opinion, all that stuff is good, but this is, in my opinion, the miss is better than the hit. The miss is this special attack isn't spent and the target takes 15 residual damage. So 15 residual damage is the standard amount that you would get for missing any special attack. But the best thing is anytime you use a special attack, if it's you use it and then you miss, it's gone. You don't get to use it again. Not Mark of Death. You get to use Mark of Death again. Obviously, you got to have a special token, but you get to use it again. And even if you miss again, that's another 15 damage. So, this is why I was mentioning a little bit earlier that this character is the best, in my opinion, the best chance to hit character. Um, or at least get a positive outcome. So with Dragon Blood, you're blessed, right? Just from choosing that ability, you're blessed right there. So you got a better chance to hit with that one. Searing Vengeance, even if you do not hit, you're doing almost as much damage as if you did hit. Life Explosion, even if you miss that one, you're getting more healing than had you just healed like from one of the other healers or and missed, or I mean even that second part of the effect, you're getting more healing for yourself. So and then Mark of Death, this special isn't even actually spent and they still take 15 damage. So it's just awesome. I mean that's why I love this character so much is he basically, you know negates probably about like 90% of the chance in the game. There's so much less chance with this guy because even if you do miss, you're still getting really good outcomes. So he is definitely by far my favorite. And to top it all off, here's his original model, which was pretty bland and boring, and now this is the new one. Oh yeah, look at that! Just putting a sword right through the head of a dragon. I mean, what more do you guys want? I don't know. Definitely my favorite. So what do you think about Renkyr?
He definitely has the best new mini by far.
Yeah, that's true.
He's, in my opinion, probably top three, even maybe top two best character in the game, just because he kind of eliminates you. If you're rolling pretty bad, you're still not doing terrible.
Yeah,
So that takes out the whole bad roll thing. It's just all his abilities are good.
yeah.
You know,
So, and I'll even give you guys some tips too on Renkyr for PvE. So I actually built a kind of a strategy focused on missing. So there's I think it's an artifact in the game that if you, and I don't know if I really want to go out here and try pulling it out, but basically there's an ability that if you miss, here it is, Gloves of Accuracy. The residual damage is plus 5 damage and can't lower or can lower HP to 0. So this is an incredibly good artifact to give Renkyr because even if he's missing, like especially for like Searing Vengeance, you give him Searing, do Searing Vengeance over and over. Even if he's missing, he's doing 15 damage. It's crazy, right? I mean, so and that's if the enemy that he's targeting, like if it is a dragon or something, if he's hitting, he's doing 16 damage. If he's missing, he's doing 15 damage. Like you're just like guaranteed to be just laying waste with primary attacks. So, and then of course you can lower the HP of someone to 0, which is really strong because normally that's the biggest downside of missing is you get the damage, but normally you can't kill somebody. Well, now you can. So even if you're missing away here with rank here, which even is going to give you good chances of doing some good things, uh, you're going to be doing fantastic. So anyway, definitely suggest take Gloves to Accuracy with you when you play the campaign with this guy because it is fantastic. All right, go ahead, Code.
I mean, there's not much else for me to say. He's just good character. I mean, he's good in both PvP, PvE, especially if you're fighting dragons, which you are in the campaign. Um,
And
but
even
when
if you're not, it's not that bad.
you just give him Mark of Death and then do the same thing.
Yep.
So, and I mean, when you combine it with the artifact of Gloves of Accuracy, it's like, oh, I missed, so boo-hoo. It's not even that bad then when you're doing, the difference of 1 HP.
Yep.
So he's crazy. It's just crazy. And then Mark of Death, if you miss, you keep getting it back. You're like,
Yeah.
so
So, and one thing I want to keep in mind too is Renkyr, right, we're not talking about him being the highest damage character in the game
no,
because he's definitely not. But it's about consistency. You have a
right,
character that will be putting out pretty decent damage regardless of the outcomes if you build him, right, versus pretty much almost every other character in the entire game. If you miss, you're only getting that 5 residual and that's it.
right. He isn't a wrecking ball, but being consistent, you're definitely gonna be putting damage in.
Yep. And or even still, he could be. In fact, when I had him in my campaign, he was actually kind of like one of our tanks with
Mm,
Dragon Blood of going in there and being immune to new effects.
right.
So anyway, yep, Renkyr definitely one of the craziest heroes. A mix of tank, makes a healer, makes a DPS character, so got a lot going on. All
And
right.
best mini.
Oh, and definitely the best mini, without a doubt. Definitely the best. All right. Well, that I think about. Oh, I guess we should probably talk about synergies, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
bruisers. If you haven't been following along already, I think I kind of talked about how the bruisers are kind of a mix of a lot of things. They're a mix of damage dealers, tanks, healers, tacticians, controllers. So, obviously the one thing that they're not exactly, and you could almost argue that Mark of Death is almost equivalent to like a shooter ability in the way that you're doing. Like for instance, Blizzard does 25 damage. Now, obviously, you're going to only apply it to one versus three different, like she gets to do, but um, like Juliet. But still, you're talking on the levels of uh, a a shooter. So it's almost like every class in one with this guy. Anyway, so yeah, there's such a good mix of characters. The weakest link, without a doubt, is Ohris. He a lot of the times characters are mostly not as strong like PVE wise, but even Ohris is a little bit weaker in PvP too. Just at least with this special. I mean, he's gonna do a lot of damage, but it's still a little bit weaker. He's not horrible either, but still a little bit more limited. Otherwise, all the other bruisers are very good. They can be mixed and kind of thrown with most teams. Really good combination with tanks. Really good combination with tacticians. Um, they're going to be your front lines. They could be potentially a tank if you don't bring one, or they kind of can fill in the role of a brute if you don't bring a brute. Um, Obviously they're not really gonna, fill exactly the place of like a shooter or controller, but you can kind of mitigate it a little bit depending on who you're playing. And same thing with healer. Um, but they're still very good utility used in a lot of different strategies and ideas. So they're a good one to throw in, especially if you don't want to go with like a standard tank healer DPS type combination. You want a little bit of a mix. Um, anything in particular you wanted to talk about, Code, for bruisers and combinations?
Um, it depend. It really depends on which bruiser you're picking. Because they are kind of like two classes. There, I like to call them
Yeah.
the original dual class.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
so it's hard to like say, oh, you should pick a bruiser and with this class. I mean, like Ascaran, for example, is kind of like a healer, so you may not want a healer with him, or you might want to do extra healing depending on your team. So,
Yeah.
it's not like that's kind of the pro and con with them. If you're trying to pick a team, it's hard to always mix properly, but at the same time, they can fit into a lot of teams. Like if you need that extra character,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
it can be a pro and a con depending on what your experience with the game and team management and stuff like that when
Yeah.
designing. So
They're definitely a more challenging class, which I think I mentioned earlier.
right.
Definitely more challenging class than some of the other ones to use very effectively. So I will say Vanarus is a very good hero to line up, uh, try to line up enemies with. So maybe you're pairing him up with the Minotaur, or maybe Rokaru is a good one to team up with. Who else? I mean, Neri probably another good one too. There's a
Hmm.
lot of heroes that could benefit from those types of things. Girana would be a good one as well. Um, Nacrol's not too bad. Yeah, there's definitely some benefits. I mean, they're a little bit more overlapping on that point because they both have abilities to negate healing effects.
Right.
But still, I mean, at the same time, you can make a very good argument about them being an excellent team together. Let's say you're going against a PvP team, a PvP match with a somebody selects a healer. Well, you select Nacrol and Vanarus. Nacrol's Evil Sword negates any effects that make enemies within 2 squares. You regain HP, and you throw Soul Corruption on somebody. Basically, you can pretty much make it so that way a team may get almost no healing at all.
Right. Right.
I mean, especially yeah, I mean, you get Nacrol in the right spot and throw Soul Corruption on one of the um, strong characters that you really want to make sure doesn't get that healing. That's maybe a focus. Good one to throw on there, and then Nacrol just locks down the rest of the team too. So that way, Hope can't be getting triggered. Uh, and then Ascaran has got so many abilities, but healing in general is a very versatile type thing. So it can be used in a lot of different ways and strategies. Can't go wrong with Renkyr and Ohris. He's alright.
Like we said, he might be better later on. Let's.
Yeah, maybe he'll be a little bit better later on. I mean, at least Dashing Strike is a pretty strong effect or a pretty
Mhm.
strong damage ability, but I mean it's not blow me away crazy either. So anyway, so that is I think pretty much everything I want to cover for Bruisers. Definitely one of my favorite classes in Arena. Um, And in terms of announcements, I don't know if there's too much more. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but probably next week I'll cover the specials that we have, including Talessa, and I'm including Talessa specifically because she's going to be part of Wave 1. So for most people that are going to be getting um, playing this game for the first time. They're going to probably get all this content. If you got, core box and the legendary box, you'll get all these classes, and then you'll get, and if you get Dragon Collection, you'll get Talessa, and then of course you'll get the Shapeshifter and the Faceless Emperor. So yeah, you'll have all these guys. So I figured they'd be a good one to kind of finish wrapping up the Spotlight series, and that pretty much be it for the end of the year. And then probably take at least like a week break, and then probably catch up on some updates, and then we'll kind of see where we're gonna go from there. See what we want to do. Hopefully, we'll be able to play some Dragon Collection stuff soon. Recently, the board game map was added to the mod here, so you can check out the map. You can set it up if you want, and then the rule book is also in here as well. So really, the only thing we're missing now is the actual like dragon pieces and some of the I guess new card stuff, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we could probably do almost a whole video just talking about the boss versus boss mode because
It's a lot of rules.
there's a lot of things going on. So
There's a lot of rules.
there's a lot of rules. It's made me a little hesitant into jumping into it until I actually get it into my own hands. Um, but we'll talk about it. We might do that one soon. So, all right, you got anything else, Code?
Tomorrow's the last update from Dragori for the year.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So that's update day.
Hopefully get some real life photos of reworked heroes, but considering we just talked to Alex yesterday and I specifically asked him that in the stream, sounds like it may not happen unless he decides to send us like the earlier photos. or unless they got something over the weekend or whatever.
Unless they got something today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll see what that is. And anyway, that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, press the bell button, do a handstand, and everything else. And we'll see you later.
Take care.
All right, see ya.